I call to order this special meeting of the Anchorage Assembly. It is Monday, October 25th, 2021. We are noticed from 1 to 2 p.m. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Ms. LaFrance.
Here.
Mr. Constant. Ms. Allard. Mr. Dunbar.
Here.
Ms. Kennedy. Here. Mr. Perez-Verdia. Mr. Peterson.
Present.
Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Here.
Mr. Rivera.
Present.
Mr. Weddleton.
Here.
Ms. Zalatel.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Constant is excused and will not be joining. Mr. Dunbar, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Weddleton, would you read the land acknowledgement?
Land acknowledgement is a formal statement recognizing the indigenous people of a place. It is a public gesture of appreciation for the past and present indigenous stewardship of the lands that we now occupy. It is an actionable statement that marks our collective movement towards decolonization and equity. The Anchorage Assembly would like to acknowledge that we gather today on the traditional lands of the Dena'ina Athabasca. For thousands of years, the Dena'ina have been and continue to be the stewards of this land. It is with gratefulness and respect that we recognize the contributions, innovations, and contemporary perspectives of the Upper Cook Inlet Dena'ina.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. And before we move on, I just would like to go around the room because we have a number of members of the administration here, and we could start with you, Ms. Ennis.
Deanna's Deputy Municipal Attorney.
Joe Gerace, Interim Health Director.
Nikki Tabaka, Chief Human Resources Officer.
Amy DeMasco, Municipal Manager.
Alexis Johnson.
Jim Weingartner, Director of Real Estate.
And then also,
Dean Gates, City Council with two interpreters.
great. Thank you all. Thank you for being here. And we have 2 members of the clerk staff.
Barbara Jones.
Great, thank you. So we have 2 items of business on the agenda, 4A and 4B, which are follow-up questions from work session confirmation hearings for Mr. Gerace and Mr. Weingartner. We'll go ahead and Ms. Ennis, if you would walk us through the next steps.
The Assembly may recess to meet in executive session on a number of enumerated grounds, including subjects that tend to prejudice the reputation and character of any person, provided the person may request a public discussion. Assembly members have indicated they have personnel questions for both the appointees. Members of the public shall be excluded. Special invitees, employees, and staff members that the body determines are necessary to discussion may remain. No official action may be taken in executive session, and the session shall be electronically recorded. The tapes can be released pursuant to our public records exemptions. And 4, actually, this is an interesting one, for personnel records. For this type of a session, the Assembly actually may set a release date or may provide that no release shall occur, a little bit different than some of the other ones. Recordings of minutes of an executive session shall be available only to Assembly members or authorized municipal staff until the date of release. Finally, this is confidential, and violations of this by not keeping stuff in here confidential of both ethics, civil suits, and recall. They have very longer paragraphs, so we all know what all 3 of those mean. I would invite the chair to seek a motion to go into executive session.
Point of order. If you're going into executive session, this is Amy DeMasco, Municipal Manager, relating to an item to speak about a person, that person has a right to have that done on the public record.
Thank you, Ms. Domboski.
And that is correct if you wanted to come out of this session. And I will tell you, though, there are 2 political thoughts on that. One is that you have that absolute right. The other one is that if you're going to mention other people's names, that those people also need to be protected. So you do have the right, once questions start, to say you'd like to go to public session. A legal debate about that, depending on what's the other information that's going to be disclosed.
Thank you,
May I
Ms.
ask a
Ennis.
clarifying question?
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Dombrowski.
Thank you. I have never seen the assembly go into an executive session and pull a personnel into that executive question to question them. Is that the intent here?
Yes, it is. I'm sorry, Chair, I believe that is what it is.
Yes, that is my understanding, Ms. Ennis.
Yes, to ask
And
additional
Ms. Dombrowski.
questions from the work session that were not asked then.
And to Ms. Dombrowski, on your point of order, it is my understanding as well that if there is a motion to go into executive session, and we do indeed go into executive session, then at that point, that discussion as to whether or not the individual would prefer to have the conversation in public then can be discussed
At that time.
at that time. Did you have any other questions on that?
Thank you.
Mr. Littleton?
So you mentioned that, did I catch right, so an executive session, and we're talking about personnel, you may not have to ever have a public record, is that, did I get that right?
It does, under our new code, which was just, was changed about a year ago, it says that that you can decide not to have a release date. I would assume that if the questioning implicates other person's names or other events that the person doesn't want to be associated, let's say it's allegation of sexual misconduct, that you as a body may say, no, we don't want that released.
Okay, that's unique, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Littleton. Ms. Jones?
Ms. Allen has joined on the phone. I wanted to let you know that for the record.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. And I also want to point out that I've been advised that the municipal attorney, Patrick Burke, is on the line as well. Ms. Dombrowski, do you know if there are any other members of the administration on the line?
Not to my knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and read the two items. And it is my understanding that we can take two separate motions to go into executive session. And one scenario would be that if there's an affirmative vote to go into executive session for both, we can go into one and then proceed with the next immediately without having to come into executive session. Is that correct?
That's
Ms.
correct,
Ennis?
and without having to reread all of this again. So, yes.
Okay, so Ms. Jones?
Ms. LaFrance, one other thing that I'd like to make clear to anyone who happens to be viewing the live stream on YouTube is that when you go into executive session, the YouTube will end. And then when you come back, it's going to be a new YouTube live stream address. So there's going to be, it's got to be two separate live streams because we can't let it sit out there while you're in executive session.
Understood. Thank you, Ms. Jones. And the public has access then to that second address for the second live stream, or will have access. That will be posted. Okay.
Yes, if the public just goes to the Municipality of Anchorage Meetings YouTube channel, they will see the next meeting come up.
Great. Thank you.
And if
Ms.
you'd like,
Ennis?
I'd be glad to state the motion for you.
Okay, I will read the
Okay,
two items,
that's fine.
and then we will proceed. So, the first item of business, 4A, follow-up questions from work session confirmation hearing regarding Joe Gerace, nominated for Anchorage Health Director. Item 4B, follow-up questions from work session confirmation hearings regarding Jim Weingartner, nominated for Real Estate Director. Ms. Ennis?
Yes, let me state the motion for you to be helpful. The motion would be for the Assembly to move into executive session to address subjects that tend to prejudice the reputation and character of any person, provided the person may request a public discussion.
So do we just like the motion, so we make one motion for the A?
Yes, two separate motions.
So this would be,
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, per individual.
So then do we get out of executive session and do the second motion for B?
We would, I don't think we need to, no, I would do them both right now. I think just simpler in terms of process. You have to make both motions, and then begin.
So motion would be I move into executive session for 4A and 4B.
I would split them.
Okay, move to go into executive session for 4A.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Madam Clerk, or I guess I should ask, is there any further discussion since I know there have been some questions about process? I don't see anyone asking to be in the queue, so Madam Clerk, would you conduct the vote, please?
Yes. Ms. LaFrance?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson is excused. Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Rivera?
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Weddleton?
Yes.
Ms. Allard?
Yes.
Ms. Zolotow?
Yes.
Did I ask Mr. Rivera already? Okay, Mr. Rivera?
Yes, for a second time.
Oh, then I missed Mr. Dunbar.
Yes.
Two different lists in two different orders, sorry about that. Okay, Mr. Perez Verdilla? I believe he is not on the line. And Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Yes.
The motion passes 9-2, Madam Chair.
Did you say 9-2?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Wait, it can't be 9-2.
Yeah, there aren't 11 of us
I
here.
have Ms. Allard and
Should be 7.
Mr. Constant and Mr. Perez Verdilla are absent.
9-0.
I think it's 9-0. Yeah.
Sorry, I apologize. Thank you.
Yep.
Miss Allard's here. I'm not.
Sorry.
Can you repeat what's being
Yes.
said, please? I apologize.
Yes, and we can hear you, Ms. Ellard, and have marked you as present. We were discussing the vote tally, which is 9-0 in favor of the motion to go into executive session for questions from the work session confirmation hearing for Joe Gerace. And then now we'll proceed and ask if there is a second motion to go into a work session or executive session for questions from the work session confirmation hearings regarding Jim Weingartner, nominated for real estate director.
Okay, move to go into executive session for 4B.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, members may proceed to vote on the motion to go into executive session for questions from the work session confirmation hearing regarding Jim Weingartner. Madam Clerk, would you conduct the vote, please?
Yes, Mr. Weddleton,
Yes.
Ms. Allard,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Rivera,
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy,
Yes.
Ms. LaFrance,
Yes.
Ms. Zolotow,
Yes.
Mr. Dunbar,
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Yes.
And that motion is approved 9-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The motion to go into executive session regarding follow-up questions from the work session confirmation hearing for Mr. Weingartner passes 9-0.
Madam Chair, you are in executive session for 4B.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. 4B, follow-up questions from work session confirmation hearing regarding Jim Weingartner, nominated for real estate director, who is coming into the room, and then we'll do the roll. What's that? It is
Austin, Meg, Chris. Who else am I
Oh,
missing? Anyway, regardless.
Okay. jumping to do the
Yes,
roll call.
please, ma'am.
Okay, Ms. LaFrance,
Here?
Mr. Constant, I believe he asked to be excused.
Yes.
Ms. Allard,
Here.
Mr. Dunbar,
Here.
Ms. Kennedy,
Here.
Mr. Perez Verdilla,
Here.
Mr. Peterson,
Present.
Ms. Quinn Davidson,
Excuse.
asked to be excused. Mr. Rivera,
Present.
Mr. Weddleton,
Here.
and Ms. Zolotel asked to be excused. So it's 8
8.
to
Okay.
0. So you're in executive session.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Ms. Ennis?
Yeah, I wondered if I could just bring up again the,
Oh,
current-
excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt. You
Oh,
need the
that's
rest
right.
of the room to identify themselves.
Okay.
Deanna's Deputy Municipal Attorney.
Jim Weingartner, Acting Director of Real Estate.
Nikki Chewbacca, Chief Human Resources Officer.
Barbara Jones, Municipal Clerk.
Amy Dabowski, Municipal Manager, and Patrick Burke, Municipal Attorney, is on the line as well.
Thank you.
Alexis Johnson, PA to the Mayor.
Dean Gates, Assembly Council, and I have with me some controllers, Gina Ashwin and Brenna Overnight.
Great. Thank you. Ms. Ennis?
Yeah, I wanted to mention again the current litigation with Christina Hendrickson, and that it really is important to try to stay away from that for the most part. For one thing, what goes on here, you will all become witnesses to. There's already a group of, I think, assembly people that are likely to be deposed. Of course, Mr. Weingarten is likely to be deposed as well. So you'd be better to leave that issue alone for everybody's sake. Also, these recordings are confidential under municipal law. That does not mean a superior court can't reach in and grab them. And so please be very cautious about avoiding that litigation one way or the other. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Ennis, and I just want to call attention to the time. We did extend to 2:30, so we have about 10 minutes left. Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you. We have time for questions.
Yes,
Yeah?
sure.
Although, perhaps I'll make a motion to extend to 2:40.
Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any opposition to extending to 2:40? Seeing, hearing no opposition, we're extended to 2:40. Go ahead, Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate what you said, Ms. Ennis, and I read the emailed guidance as well. But I do think we're in a challenging position here because some of the assertions or some of the role of Mr. Weingartner in the administration prior to his appointment, I think are sort of dispositive or very important considerations for this appointment. And so we're in sort of a unique set of circumstances right now, to me at least, where there's this crucial piece of information, or there's a bunch of information that to me is needed to confirm, and we can't get access to it. So I've written some questions that are, I tried to make them of the nature where they didn't directly impact anything having to do with Ms. Hendrickson. And that was what I understood to be the guidance, that any relationship between you and Ms. Hendrickson or anything that Ms. Henderson discussed with the administration, that's out of my questions. But there are other things that will certainly be raised in that litigation, but are sort of knowledge that Mr. Weingartner possesses that I think, so I just have a series of questions, and I guess I'm going to try to ask these questions, and you can perhaps interrupt if you think it's inappropriate. And some of these are duplicative of things you've already been asked in public session. But again, I just think we're in a really challenging position here. We've never had a confirmation hearing for someone that is being actively sued, there's litigation present, and the municipality is a party to that litigation at the same time. And so I think you've been placed in a really challenging position, as is the municipality. And so we'll just try to work through this. Mr. Chewbacca?
Sorry, I didn't interrupt you. Finish your
I'm ready to ask my questions.
Oh, okay. Can I just add something, Madam Chair?
Chewbacca? Yes.
Thank you. So, if I could just have some clarification, my understanding is for nominees and for appointments, it's based on the professional qualifications, and if there's any ethical, character-related considerations, that's also something that can be explored. I'm just trying to understand how what you just shared, Assemblymember Dunbar, connects to those two things. Maybe it does, but I just wanted to just put out there for the assembly, I don't think it's appropriate to be asking questions about matters that pertain to the operations of the municipality of Mr. Weingarner. His confirmation is about his qualifications and if there's any questions about character, ethics, whatever, those matters. So I just want to put that out there. I don't know that it's appropriate to be discussing what happened as it related to Ms. Hendrickson in any way, shape, or form, because that's not related to his professional qualifications.
And Ms.
I
Anderson?
agree insofar as questions about operations wouldn't support an executive session as a reason to go into that. So it should be character, qualifications. Those are the main subjects.
Well, so I intend to ask primarily questions about your role in the administration before you got this before you had this appointment, which I think are clearly part of your qualifications. For several months you worked for the administration. I'm trying to suss out what you were doing for the administration. That's part of your qualifications to me, clearly. There might be ethical and character issues. I don't think I have questions directly targeted at that, but those might arise as well as we go through these conversations. And that's why I wanted to have it in executive session. And I'll say that for my part, when we get to the idea of sealing the tapes or not, I'm going to ask that we do it until the conclusion of any kind of litigation. I don't, you're right, perhaps the Superior Court could try to speak, this needed to be done, but I can't speak to that.
Madam Chair, point of order.
Yes, Ms. Dembowski?
Thank you. I'm confused. So if the point to come into executive session is to discuss something that could personally disparage or shed poorly on a nominee or a person, are we just having a second confirmation hearing where we're talking about all these things, as Mr. Dunbar said, that we were already asked in open session? Or are we specific to those issues that you asked to go into executive session about personnel matters that may show lightly or poorly on the nominee? I don't have the verbiage in front of me, but my question is going to the heart of, are you going into executive session for those matters which you stated, which is specifically about matters that could poorly reflect on the nominee, or are we now expanding that in executive session to all these other things that were asked on the record?
Thank you, Ms. Dembowski. It is my understanding we're not expanding to ask other things, but to ask questions that were not allowed in the general session because of the nature of the questions.
Thank you for the clarification.
And I would just confirm, that's what I heard.
Yes, although some of these might prove duplicative, and if you decide not to answer, that's so be it. But I'm going to try to go down this road. Again, we're in a really challenging position here because we have active litigation, and it touches on personnel issues, and so I'm trying to simultaneously not implicate the personnel issues related to Ms. Hendrickson, but also suss out some of the role of Mr. Weingarner at the administration. So, yeah.
Okay. You want to go ahead then?
Yeah.
Mr. Dunbar? Okay. I think Mr. Weingarner is ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Weingarner, can you remind us when you were first hired by the Bronson administration?
The start date for employment was July 1.
July 1. And, by the way, I might take notes here, but I'm going to destroy this afterwards. What was your title, your initial title?
The actual document that I received.
I'm sorry, could you speak up a little bit for people on the phone?
Yes. The actual document that I received said Special Assistant to the Mayor. However, I was verbally told I was Chief Housing Officer.
Okay. Okay, that's right there. That's really clarifying for me. So you were working at the mayor's office, but you were assigned to real estate services or a different department?
I was direct report to the mayor.
And were you okay, your direct report to the mayor? Yes?
I'm sorry to interrupt. This really does have nothing to do with personnel, quality, and character, and stuff that would tend to prejudice.
Okay. All right, I'll ask you this then. Did you know that position partly funded by the Rasmussen Foundation, and did you know it was partly funded by the Rasmussen Foundation?
Point of order, that is not, again, not.
Madam Chair, this is Assemblymember Allard.
Hold on, Ms. Allard.
I-
We've got, there's another point of order on the floor. And for these, I'm going to ask the attorneys, because I know we're threading the needle here on what can be asked in a general session and on the public record and what can't. So would one of the attorneys please respond to the point raised by Ms. Dombowski?
And I've already said that this doesn't sound to me to be a personnel or a matter that tends to prejudice someone that would support executive session questioning, so.
Okay.
Mr.
Okay.
Gates?
I agree with Dennis from what it sounds like. I mean, perhaps he's moving in some direction, we'll get there, but so far the questions just sound like, do you have this position or not?
Okay. And just to follow up on that, if that's the case, these are questions then that could be asked at Wednesday's meeting.
Okay, great.
As well.
That's fine. Can I then run through these questions and you can tell me if these can be asked at Wednesday's meeting? Because,
sure.
okay.
Do you want to do that now or offline?
I'd like to do it now. Just, I mean, the purpose for me of this executive session is to prevent us asking you an inappropriate question that could end up in litigation. So, okay. So I was going to ask about the Rasmussen Foundation and whether it's approved by the Rasmussen Foundation. You're saying that can be asked in open session on Wednesday. Okay. I'm going to ask you about your duties. I mean, what exactly were you doing? Because I don't really understand what your duties were at prior to this appointment. I wanted to ask if one of your duties was finding people to serve on the Heritage Land Bank Board. Is that something I can ask on Wednesday? I'm asking if you recruited people for the Heritage Land Bank Board. Okay. And if so, who instructed you to do so, or if you did so under your own volition? Okay. And then
Why don't I speak up if I hear any objection?
Okay. And then I'm going to ask.
You want me to answer those questions?
I think they're saying that this is better to be asked and answered on Wednesday. And then I'm going to ask, about the code requirements for the HLB board and if the members you recruited fit the code requirements. And that's it. So if we want to pull out of this executive session, then it's all good.
Okay, so just to clarify, the questions that Mr. Dunbar asked, according to Ms. Ennis and then Mr. Gates, I'll ask for your concurrence as well, are questions that are appropriate to ask in a public session. And
Yes.
Ms. Ennis says yes.
I concur.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gates. And then I have another member in the queue, but did you have anything else?
No, that's all.
Mr. Dunbar? Okay, thank you. Ms. Allard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make a comment that it feels like this is a fishing expedition, and the attorneys already chimed in, thankfully. But I would also like to state, this executive session is supposed to be extended based on questions that we have directly with Mr. Weingartner in regards to his qualifications. And is that correct, or am I missing something?
Thank you, Ms. Allard. The purpose of the executive session is to ask questions that could prejudice reputation. And I believe out of an abundance of caution, Mr. Dunbar went through his list of questions to confirm that those are all questions appropriate to be asked in a public forum. So,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
thank you, Ms. Allard. Do any other members have questions? I'm just pausing to give members on the phone time.
Actually, Madam Chair, I do have one. If nobody's in front of me, I'll just go back in queue. It's Ms. Allard.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Allard.
Thank you. This question is more for the administration. I'm not sure who would like to answer it. It's probably a 2 or 3 part question. Is it typical? Is it okay, Madam Chair?
Yes, it is fine to ask a relevant question to the
Thank you.
purpose of the special executive session.
Okay, thank you. Is it typical for individuals that are up for positions to be moved around frequently or unfrequently, but to be moved into different positions?
Through the chair, this is Nikki Chewbacca, Assembly Member Allard. It is not uncommon for people to be transferred to different positions in the administration, no.
May I do a follow-up, Madam Chair?
Go ahead, Ms. Allard.
And just for clarification, Mr. Chewbacca, if positions do come open for whatever reason, then it could be typical that we promote individuals into different lines of duties. Is that correct?
Through the chair, Assembly Member Allard, yes, that is correct.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Allard. Do any other members have questions? Okay, seeing no other members in the queue, we have options for motions, just like last time. A member could move to deliberate and there could be discussion here, or a member could move to not just end this part of the work session, but to end, I believe.
To come out of this portion of the executive session, we do need to go back to the special meeting.
Right, okay. But a motion to come out of this work session would effectively end the executive session, correct?
I'm
Or
not
out of
sure,
this
but just
part of the, sorry, out of
move
this
back to
part of it.
special afterwards.
Okay. I
So I
don't know.
move to get out of the executive session.
Moved by Mr. Middleton, seconded by Ms. Kennedy. Any discussion to the motion to get out of executive session? I don't see anyone in the queue. Madam Clerk, would you conduct the vote on the motion to get out of executive session?
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
Ms. Allard,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Rivera,
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy,
Yes.
Ms. LaFrance,
Yes.
Mr. Dunbar,
Yes.
Mr. Perez Revilla,
Yes.
and I am continuing to mark Mr. Constant, Ms. Zolotel, and Ms. Davidson as absent. The motion to come out of executive session passes 8-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Executive session. There were 2 votes to extend the executive session. First, it was extended to 2:30 and then subsequently extended to 2:40. Because of technical difficulties, the first session 4A did not start until 1:48 p.m. and 4B started at 2:15. Ms. Ennis?
Yeah, final matter for these is to set the release date of these recordings. With respect to matters which tend to defame or injure the reputation of persons, the Assembly may set a release date or provide that no release shall occur. So my recommendation to the chair would be to start with Mr. Weingartner and discuss release date.
Thank you, Ms. Ennis. So we will take your advice and start with release date for 4B. The follow-up question, the tapes for follow-up questions from work session confirmation hearing regarding Jim Weingartner, nominated for real estate director. Mr. Weddleton?
We have a question. So I don't think we broached on anything appropriate for executive session, so would it be proper to say that could be released now?
That would be my recommendation.
Okay, I'd move to,
Ms. Jones?
So here's the problem. I understand what you're saying, but once you start releasing, I've been here for 10 years, and you have never released an executive session tape. So I just want you to know that before you make that decision. This is unusual. Like you said, you've never done this before. But I just want to make sure that that you're all okay with that before you go.
Sure, go ahead.
so Ms. Jones, so if we were to say 4B can be released, is it able, can we do that? Because you made one long tape, can you break that part out? Or
So what it will look like Mr. Weddleton, is that I'm not exactly sure, but I'm thinking we've got the YouTube link for the beginning of the meeting, and we're gonna have the YouTube link for the end of the meeting. And then I think in the middle, we could have an MP4 link that's just gonna be the audio recording. So yes, we could do that if that's what you'd like.
Yeah, I think a motion, so we can do it, you're just warning us that it hasn't happened before.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'd like to make it available as soon as possible in a day,
Oh, they'll be available at the end of the day.
at the end of the day.
Okay. So the motion is on,
Move to make the tape regarding 4B available by the end of today.
Well, if you could not do that. I mean, we usually do it within 24 hours, so, so if you could just give us a little
No,
grace.
that's fine, that's what I searched it for before, so.
Sorry.
and Mr.
I would
Gates,
suggest some words we often use for this kind of situation is as soon as practicable.
okay.
I move to release the tape for 4B as soon as practical.
Is there a second?
Second.
Can you please repeat the motion, please?
Move to release the tape regarding 4B as soon as practical.
Second.
Moved and seconded, however, I need to call attention to the time, it's 2:39, and we're only until 2:40.
That was for the executive session, wasn't it, or the whole meeting?
Well, we still need to extend.
Oh, that's right.
Either way, we're,
Move to extend the meeting to 2:50.
Second.
moved and
Second.
seconded. Any opposition? Seeing, hearing none, we're extended to 2:50. Okay, the motion on the floor is to release the tape as soon as practicable. It's been seconded. Any discussion? And this is the tape for Mr. Weingartner's portion. Ms. Kennedy?
Thank you. And, I guess I'm just questioning whether or not, since we've never done that before at all, why would we do it over something that really has no content? So, anyway.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Mr. Weddleton?
Because in previous executive sessions that I've been involved with, we had reasons, the questions and discussion was items that needed to be in executive session, but I think what we found in this particular part, there wasn't really anything that warranted a special session, executive session. So I think it's re-released and the world can see that.
Even though there's really nothing, no content to it. Anyway, I was just thinking, I'm not sure I wanted to mislead the public that they were gonna get to see some kind of interesting conversation or whatever, when actually everything that we talked about will be brought out again during Wednesday's meeting anyway, so. I don't wanna set a precedence that the public then thinks that, oh, well, there's all these executive session tapes, like as Jones said, for 10 years there hasn't been any released, so. Do we wanna start that now when there's actually nothing for the public to get excited about? So anyway, and thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Mr. Weddleton and then Mr. Peterson?
Well, I'd say that people should know that there are tapes for executive sessions, but they have release dates associated with them. And some over the history of Anchorage must have been released by now, where people can hear them. I mean, they're not hidden forever, right? And some are, I don't remember what they are, but some were only for a year or two, or until a court case is ended, that then they're available. So in this case, we're just saying, okay, there was nothing here really executive session worthy, as it turned out. Let's release it now, so there's no suggestion that anything different, or let the world see.
Well, I'm under the impression then that Ms. Jones was saying we haven't done that in 10 years, the 10 years she's been here.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy.
Clarification on when tapes have actually been released and when the public has actually had them available would be nice. Thanks.
Ms. Jones?
There are two different questions. So the question is, and the motion that Mr. Weddleton made is to release the tapes now. All of the other motions were also what Mr. Weddleton said. They were to release the tapes in 10 years or 5 years after the end of the litigation or something like that. So they were all different. They were never released at this time.
I see what you're saying. Thank you. Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Thanks. So we'll go to Mr. Peterson and then Mr. Dunbar. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yeah, I just think it's a bad idea. It set a bad precedent, and we've never done this in my whole time on the assembly. I'm against this idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Dunbar?
Yeah, I'll say that insofar as people are relying on me asking a series of questions on Wednesday, I would say don't rely on that, because what I learned in the executive session from the attorneys is I could ask them on Wednesday, but I might not. And so I don't know if that cuts for or against releasing the tapes, but just saying that. And now I know I can't ask the necessarily will.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. I want to note for the record, too, that Mr. Perez-Verdia had to leave at 2:38. Are there any other members who want in the queue on the motion to release as soon as practical? Ms. Allard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. My comment is that if we wanted to have this done on public record, we should have discussed it on public record, and to have had this in executive session and now want to release it, I find is hypocrisy. So if it's an executive session, there it remains, and I agree with Mr. Peterson on this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Allard. Seeing no other members in the, Ms.
Can I
Ennis?
just make a comment?
Sure.
The law does provide for a release date. That's part of the responsibility of an executive session. However, I think in the past you've had 6 months after litigation ends. There's no date. It's not certain, so no one asked for it. But this is easily determinable now. So it's really been more of a logistical issue why there have not been release dates, I believe, in the past. Because they're following something else, and it's litigation after the appeal, was that after reconsideration, all that kind of stuff.
Thank you, Ms. Ennis. Ms. Kennedy?
Sorry, I'm trying not to prolong this too much, but if this particular motion doesn't pass, then when typically would the release date be? Is there anything that's automatic, or do we literally have to vote on some kind of release date?
Ms. Ennis?
Well, actually, interestingly enough, because this is opened up under a tendency to defame a reputation, theoretically, that somebody does not have to set a release date.
Then how is that decided?
Yeah, I mean, we're just going to go in circles for something that's pretty simple in terms of releasing these.
Seeing no other members in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to release the tape for Mr. Weingarner's executive session as soon as practicable.
Mr. Weddleton?
Yes.
Ms. Allard?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
No.
Mr. Rivera?
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy?
Yes.
Ms. LaFrance?
Yes.
Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
Mr. Perez-Verdia?
Excused.
I will, okay, the motion passes 6-1.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So those tapes will be released sometime 24, 48 hours. So, okay, so then the next is for 4A. The
Madam
tapes.
Chair, point of order.
Yes, Ms. Kennedy?
On the vote again, there was one no vote, and I think we're down to 6 voting members right now? Or do we still have 7?
We have 7.
We still have 7, okay, thank you. All right.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Okay, so the records tapes for 4A, follow-up questions for work session confirmation hearing regarding Joe Gerace, nominated for Anchorage Health Director. What is the will of the body concerning those tapes?
Move to not release those tapes.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Could you please repeat that, Ms. Chair? Sorry.
Sure. The motion is to not release the tapes for the executive session for Mr. Gerace. It has been seconded. Oh, sorry. Okay, seeing no one in the queue, members may proceed to vote on the motion to never release the tapes for the executive session for Mr. Gerace. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Weddleton?
Yes.
Mr. Allard?
No.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Rivera?
Yeah.
Ms. Kennedy?
Yes.
Ms. LaFrance?
Yes.
Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
The motion passes 6-1.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So that tape will not be released. Okay, we have 2 minutes left, and we are at audience participation, correct, Ms. Ennis? There's nothing else that we need to
I believe so, I need to
address? Okay, or anything else from the session? Okay. Audience participation, we have 2 minutes. Are there any members, I don't see any members of the public in the room. Ms. Kennedy?
Just a kind of a point of order, I guess, or point of information. Are people able to call in now from the public if they wanted to participate? Or are we still kind of locked out with the phone system for the public?
Ms. Jones?
So, Ms. Kennedy, I think that's something that's going to be on the agenda for your next Rules Committee meeting. The public never calls in for phone participation. They sign up and we call them. And so no one signed up before this meeting, and there wasn't an option to sign up before this meeting. It's the nature of special meetings because of the short notice before the meetings. And it does require some IT work to even allow that if we could. So we don't have anyone that signed up for phone participation. So there is no one to call.
And it is now 2:50, so we are automatically adjourned. Thank you all for participating.